Okay, we should be going now. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Okay, I think we are. Okay, we should be live now. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I've been on 4 Zoom meetings today. So it's been one of those days. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I know other people will come on and join us. And let me go ahead and just we got some people over here on the side. Unmute. If you those that have joined us already, if you would keep your phone muted until we bring you in. If you have something to say, let us know. We'll be glad to accommodate. We want to kind of go from there. So we got quite a few people on. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As it is my custom, we're going to open up in a word of prayer. And then we'll go into our session on tonight. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this opportunity that you've given us to come together, to collaborate, God, to come together with a plan and a strategy. God, it is our desire, God, to build bridges. It is our desire, God, to work with our local government. And I know there's many things that's going on around us, but I pray tonight, God, that you would give us clarity, or give us a strategy and a plan that could be executed that would benefit the citizens of Greensboro. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. 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 So over the weekend, my phone started blowing up, and I've been getting texts and emails and saying, Erica, what are we going to do? There's some things we need to talk about. There's some things that's been going on. I've had an opportunity to if you're not currently talking, if you could mute your phone, and then we will unmute you. Hey, Pastor Shouse.
How are you?
Doing great. So if you're not talking, if you could mute your phone, and then when you want something to say, you can unmute you, okay? That would help greatly. So one of the things, I'm sorry, someone say something? Okay. One of the things that was brought to my attention that was I thought about, we currently don't know, and I can speak for myself, what is the city of Greensboro, our local officials doing to help work with community activists and clergy to help bridge that gap? And where do we see the gaps that we can fill in? So maybe Mayor Vaughan, you can bring us up to speed to where we are currently, and then where do we see some gaps that we can very well formulate community groups to go into and help with that. So if you kind of bring us up to breast, what is currently going on to try to merge the two, or to kind of help our community at large, that would be great. We can get some idea.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening. I'd like you to bring everybody up to date on some things that have happened just in the last couple of days. Police Chief Brian James did have a press conference yesterday where he responded to some of the community concerns about the 8 can't wait and use of force policies, and he issued some directives for the police department. And it was really codifying some things that he already had in place, but that he wanted to make sure that the community realized that he had heard what they had said. And it had to do with use of force, that if an officer saw another officer using use of force that was improper, that they were to intervene and report it. And that when an officer had use of force, that they were to self-report, that they were no longer to shoot at a moving vehicle or from a moving vehicle. A series of directives, not to use a chokehold. Okay. Today we were looking at the budget to see where funds could be reallocated into community programs. So we are setting up a series of town hall meetings. We hope to get input from the community. What can we as a city government do? So there are a series of things. Justin Outling was working with city staff and Guilford Metro 911 about changing the way police officers are dispatched to try to get more information on a suspect, such as height and weight, so that
Okay.
there's more information when somebody is stopped in so we are taking positive steps to be more responsive to what it is that we are hearing.
Okay. It sounds good. And one of the things, as Natasha and I spoke on last evening, I am from the premises that I want to work with our local government. I want to see how we can collaborate and work. And what I have found, I worked for the Housing Authority for 7 years, and there was a program that was called Weed and Seed. Some of you might remember that program. It was a grant-funded program where you weeded out those negative things and you sowed in positive. Well, it was a grant that was not funded. And so I want to say 2005 or so, that grant went away. And when I saw that grant go away, and I ended up leaving in 2007, I saw where that grant was vital to the community, but because it was not refunded by the federal government, it began to see a repeated cycle. We began to see some of the same things that we worked so hard to eradicate, they came back in. And so I think that as we're looking at policies, we're looking at fundings, we're looking at our communities, it is so important. And I can speak from working in the Housing Authority for 7 years, that in a lot of our communities, and I can speak this from a positive standpoint, there are a lot of things that are going on. I just think there are a lot of things that were never shed light on. And we saw a lot of the negativity as opposed to actually getting in there and talking with the community. And really, I know Dina Hayes used to, for a good while, she would come over to Ray Warren. That was one of my areas that I worked. And we would walk the community and we would talk with those that are around us. We were instrumental of cleaning up the hill. I know they had the store there. So we organized and we did a major cleanup there on that street to really get, and we had a sign erected there. And so I had an opportunity to work in several of the housing authorities in my 7 years there. There are great people. There are people that really have a lot to that they want to talk about and discuss. They just don't have access. And so how do we bring them the access that they need? How can we get them to come to where we are, or either we go to where they are? I think that they're more apt to listen if we take the concerns
Exactly.
to where they are. And so
Yes.
that could very well be a place of town hall, going to where they are and say, hey, what are your concerns? What do you see? Now, we had the PNRC officers that were there on site with us. And what I did was I was able to really forge a good relationship with my PNRC officers at the sites that I worked at. And before anything major, if it was they had to go in, they need to go into an apartment, whatever it is, there were some certain things that I laid out as guidelines that would very well make it not such a over the top that they had to do, but let's go in and try to see how we can make it work. And so I developed a very good relationship with my officers that they would call me and say, Erica, this is going on. What can we do to go in? So a lot of times we were able to go into the apartments and talk with the families and say, hey, this is what's going on. We want to give you these options. So what can we do from that? And so I found that to really be a very good lead in is having dialogue. And I think that's the one thing is that I think we miss a lot of is communication. And I think communication can get misconstrued through the media, through social media stuff that's been posted, and we're not really knowing what are the right people to go to. And so that's why I thought that was very imperative that we bring individuals to the table. I think they could really help us. I don't know if Natasha and Dion at this point, you
Well,
want to chime in?
yeah, let me just say, I
Okay.
think you're so right. When the chief was sworn in,
Mhm.
one of the first things he did was that he set up 6 community meetings to meet people where they are, to
Wow.
hear what their concerns were. And he was able, of the 6 meetings, he was able to finish 5, and then COVID happened.
Okay.
So he still has that 6th meeting to do, and then he has some after action plans as
Gotcha.
soon as he can get back out into those neighborhoods. So that's one thing that I really like about him, is that he wants to get into the neighborhoods and work with people and meet them where they are. It is very important. And today at our council work session, he committed to having all of his officers go through racial equity training.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's really, really important. So, he's got that commitment.
Okay. And what is the stance as well as cultural diversity training? Because culturally there is we live in such a culturally diverse world, and it's exactly, as an African American, my upbringing can be different from one of my counterparts of a Caucasian. I went to a predominantly all white high school, Southeast High School, so. In my high school, my neighborhood was predominantly white. We were the only 5 Black families in my community, where my parents still live out in Pleasant Garden. So that was for me, was a norm for me. And then so as I began to branch out, I began to see that was not everybody else's norm, because I grew up in that type of community. But I think also cultural diversity, how our culture responds versus the Hispanics, the white community, we respond differently when we see a police officer come into our community. We respond differently when we see things going on around us and we don't know who to turn to for help. And sometimes that reaction can be negative as well as it being positive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a part of biases.
Yes.
And there are assessments where you can take to see what biases do you deal with, and then interventions and strategies on how to negate those biases. Because sometimes you might have things that you don't even know are there. Because we just want to stick with, are you a racist, are you not, and leave it there. And it's so much deeper than that. But for me, I feel that a lot of the times the reason why we're not seeing progress are for different variables. I feel like sometimes, yes, meetings are being held, but the right people are not at the table. The main stakeholders that need to be there are not present. And it's because sometimes people want to feel comfortable with people that they know are not going to cause any confrontation, that are going to stick with the agenda at hand, that, can pass things easily, or because people don't look like you, and to me, that's unfortunate, especially when you're dealing with the community at large, because here you have the elected officials that the people voted in. But at this point in time, from being on the streets with some of the people, and me being a citizen, it does seem like there is a disconnect, or people feel as though they are not heard. Now, I'm not sure of everyone that's presently on this call, if any of them are community organizers or hardcore activists. But to me, if none of them are, some of them should have been here tonight, because they really are leading the people in the streets. The people clearly have some type of relationship and trust in them, as well as the calls to follow them. So if we're wanting change, why wouldn't those people be at the table? And I think it comes down to negotiation. Like, for example, Mayor Vaughan, have you received the, I believe it's the Greensboro Rising, like the different demands that were being asked?
We have.
Right. So in that, I know one of them was the curfew, which has been lifted, but there are other things as well. So it becomes a situation of, how do we come together to say, realistically at this point in time, which ones, they're all important, but which ones are vital now that we can agree upon to take care of, and then go from there. And I think another thing is, we keep having Zoom meetings, Facebook Lives and all kinds of different things, but people are now like, okay, I'm tired of the discussion. We know what the issues are. What is the action? I know, even as an EC teacher, when I was in a public school system, and even in business, they teach you about SMART goals. What's specific, you're measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. You take it, you break it down, you write it down, you assess it, you come back to, you give a timeline, so that people can really see what's really going on and feel like you are really serious about it. But I think too often we're playing political patty cake, or we're getting in photo ops, and it looks good and it sounds cute, but those that are paying attention, especially in this hour, are not going to let that fly.
I understand. So I think on Sunday, I said we were going to be looking at like a 90-day timeline. And that's what I committed to.
Okay.
And when you say we are going to, are you talking about like the city council? Are you talking about?
Well, I committed to a 90-day timeline. So that was my commitment.
Okay. Okay. And that will consist of what? When you say look at a 90-day timeline, what are you looking at specifically?
So I took the Obama mayoral challenge, and that was a 90-day timeline. So it was to really, the action items that he outlined were really kind of the 8 can't wait and the use of force. And it was to convene, to report out, and then to show reform and action items. So that is the timeline that I committed to, which would be greater than that, because it will entail having community meetings, and they won't just be my meetings. I know that the Greensboro Criminal Justice Advisory Committee is having their own town hall meeting next Thursday, which I know that they've already had an amazing outpouring of RSVPs. So it'll be wonderful to see how, what comes out of that meeting. So, there are town halls and other meetings going on that, that activists are having, that they're not being done under my direction, that the leaders are having to see how they can be implemented as well.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, again, because I'm not an organizer. I know I've participated in various things, but again, it would be beautiful if the different organizers and activists would, if they're setting up things where, again, you as well as the city council would go to their sessions and have those discussions. And then when you have something on your turf, that they come there as well. Yeah, and just, I guess, for those to have those understandings, like we're coming together, we're trying to do this, and having a level of respect. We understand that the tensions are high, people are emotional, people want to see things done, rightfully so. Like, people are dying every day. There's disparity everywhere we turn. And it's very unfortunate. It really, really is unfortunate. But I think people really want to know that, those that are in office really have the heart of the people. Otherwise, then the pressure is going to continue to be applied. It's not going to stop until there really is change. And then hopefully when we get to the polls, if they haven't done what they've needed to do, then they get voted out. But I know, for example, some of the dialogue that I heard as well as read, and forgive me, I wish I would have had more time to prepare, was the incident, and perhaps Mayor Vaughan, you can help with this, but the incident where I guess it appeared as though the phone lines pretty much were turned off a few days ago.
The city hall was actually the city hall was actually only open from 10 to 3. So the phone lines weren't turned off. We were still under COVID operating hours. So,
and see, that's why this conversation is good, right?
Yes.
Because that is not what is really being perceived. What is being perceived is that it was, I guess, broadcasted or reported that you would be open until that 5 o'clock hour, but then closed. So what I'm saying this to say,
yes,
the perception then says, you know what, we don't care what the people have to say. We're going to do what we want to do. We don't want to be bothered with emails and phone calls. Forget it. And then that causes more of the tear. And even when we're talking about, like, you're speaking about reform and stuff like that, I think I had read or something, like, even with Sheriff Barnes or whatever, like they passed or getting ready to pass the county commissioners for like a $295,000 armored vehicle. And right now, it's like, that's not what people are wanting to hear when it's already problems within that area, or where funds could possibly be allocated elsewhere. So, and again, I'm just going off of things that I've heard. I really wish that I could say that I'm even more versed like some of the organizers are, but I'm just gonna stay in my lane.
Yeah, and I didn't mean earlier to make it sound like those meetings would be exclusionary. That they would have their meetings and we would have our meetings, hopefully that they would unite at some point. I just didn't want to make it sound like I was going to horn in on their meetings.
Understood.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pastor Clark, we'd like to chime in and give some redress.
Not this moment. I'll wait.
Okay.
That was kind of long. We can move to the next thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pastor Schaus, would you like to come in and have anything that you would like to say? Let me unmute you. There you
I'm
go.
good right now, but I agree with Ms. Brooks, because I think a lot of time what happens is there's a disconnect because a lot of people feel like they're not being heard. So I think it's going to be important, like she said, not only to have those meetings together, but let them know that you're available for those meetings and that you'd like to attend because you want to hear what they're saying. Because a lot of it is people just want to be heard right now, is what I see from being out there, from the marching and from being in the crowd. People just want to feel like somebody's listening, and this is not going to be like it was before. They're saying they're listening and they're not. So I agree with Ms. Brooks.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask, what is it that we can do to help fill in the gaps? A consensus that I feel from myself and some others, we want to help, but where do we help? Where can we fill in? Where can we help where there are some gaps? You know, what can we do to help bring this together? I'm about solution. And so if you give me a task, I'm gonna stay in that lane and I'm gonna work that little area, and then I'll move to the next area. So I want to help, but where is there a need so I can get in where there's a need?
Well, I would say just help us bring all the voices to the table, because sometimes it's, the same group of people who always come to the table, to make sure that all neighborhoods are heard. I think that's the most important thing, that this needs to be a total community discussion. So I think that's where that you can do the most good, that maybe, some people that we don't hear from, that we talk about meeting people where they are. We can certainly go anywhere and convene a community meeting. So I think that's really, and we got to do it fast.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and hopefully we can do it in person soon,
Yeah.
though doesn't look like that way. Some people aren't technologically savvy, and we're doing a lot of this by Zoom, and I'm afraid we're leaving a lot of people out. So, whether we have to bring masks and find a big room, we need to accommodate people. We're talking about meeting people where they are. We have to meet people who don't have computers and Zooms, and that we can talk to them as well.
Gotcha. Bishop Starks, I see that you are on. I'm trying to unmute you so you can come into our conversation. Can you unmute yourself, or can you see? Try to unmute Bishop Starks. I can't unmute him. Bishop Starks, I'm not sure if you're able to hear me. If you could unmute yourself, that would greatly appreciate that. Robert, Mr. Robert Carter, you have anything that you would like to add to the conversation? I'm having trouble unmuting people. Let's see.
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Not at this time. I'm just listening, and I'm just kind of listening right now and
Okay.
taking in some things. Yeah.
Okay. So, Mayor, may I ask the question, would it be needful or would it be helpful? I know there's so many groups out here, and I know too many groups can be overwhelming. So is there a way that groups or organizations can kind of forge together, that can work together, that can collaborate, that can really see how we can bring our resources and our information to the table together and work together? Because I know for me, too many small little groups can get confusing. But if we can have definitive groups, that this group is assigned to this task, this group has this task, and then as we're doing that, we're kind of walking through the policies and different things that's going on. And one of my observations, I was not at either weekend for the protests or anything over the weekend. My schedule wouldn't allow, but what I've noticed just in my observation, there are a lot of voices that feel unheard. And so then how do we get those voices to be heard in a way that we can understand what they're trying to say? Because sometimes it's hard to articulate what you're really saying, but you can understand it maybe through their body language or through different ways, because there are different forms of communication. And some communication can be, the body language can be through what you say. How do we do that and yet still work within the spirit of helping our city to move forward? Because there is a lot of anger, there's a lot of outrage of what happened as a result of George Floyd that has spilled over to other cities and other states. Now it is a, and I'm glad that we're taking the challenge from the President Obama's challenge. I'm glad that we are looking at and considering that 90-day challenge to really look at our policies, to really look at how we can bring Greensboro to the forefront, because Greensboro is historical. We have a lot of historical things that has happened over the 50, 60 years in our city that we need to be able to still push to the forefront. But yet, how do we put a new face to what has happened in the past, but yet bring it forward? If that makes sense.
You know, I wish I had all the answers, and I don't right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to rely on some people to help me get to those answers. And, you know, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach out to the community and maybe some professional facilitation. I don't have all the answers as I sit here right now.
Have you been in any contact with the school system, the school administrators, district, to see superintendents, to see what are some of the concerns that they have? And has that been any dialogue
on this specific issue? No.
Okay. I'm trying to get Bishop Starks on here. He was
Dr. Erica.
Yes.
Is there any way that we can, because I wasn't able to participate either, but the one thing that I have noticed, it's a lot of millennials.
No, yes.
And I think that we need someone who's in touch with that group of people, and who, like Natasha said, who's the organizers, because I think that's how you're going to get everyone to the table. Because when you look out there, it's not a lot of people that look our age. It's a lot of millennials. And I think something, I'm not technical savvy either, but we need someone maybe on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, to be able to reach probably youth pastors at these churches, to probably round up, the people that are out there protesting, to find out, these voices, who are they connected with, who's leading it. I think that would be, what Natasha was saying, because we're not organizers, but somebody has to be getting all these millennials out there, and they're knowing what time to show up, what to do. There has to be some level of communication. And I think that's the vein that we need to tap into, to be able to get all those people together. And like you said, be task oriented. Okay, what are your views? What is it that you're needing our mayor to do, our chief of police to do? What is it that you're looking for? So that way we can have something to bring to the table to say, these are the things that we're looking at in our community. And these are the things that will help this resolve, to bring about change, in Greensboro.
And I certainly hope that they're going to want to work with me. I know they're angry with me right now, but I hope that we can all work together to make Greensboro a better place to live, that we can put aside our differences and work to make some systemic change.
And I can say for me personally, and I know this is going to kind of sound mixed emotion, I was in favor of the curfew. And I'm going to tell you why I was in favor of the curfew. I was in favor of it because of the property, because of the amount of destruction that we saw downtown. I know that was a voice for the voiceless, but now we have to work to rebuild that. And I know that voice of the millennials need to be heard. So they responded how the only way of form of communication that they could speak at that time. And so as a result of it, it did minimize it. And I know there were some people that were angry as a result of that. But we do know that we cannot continue with the property destruction and advance for a long period of time for it to continue, because as it continues, it can get worse and it can get worse. So how do we put a stop to that, or at least minimize it, to hear the voices? And I'm like Alisa, I don't know who's leading the millennials. I don't know who's guiding that ship. I don't know how they're getting their communication out. I don't know. And so that is a good place to organize, to reach out, to find out who is organizing, because it is apparent there is a leader that's organizing them place, as we said, to be at a specific place, a specific time. My question too, as a result of that, voter registration, or what are we looking at? We're doing these. How are we getting them to register to vote? What is our look as voter registration? Because that's important. November the 3rd is coming, and we need to be able to make sure that for them to understand, to educate on what it is, the importance of voting. How do we do that? How can we mobilize voting around? And there again, take the voting registrations to where they are. They won't have to come out of their community. We can sort of work within the communities at large and get people to register to vote. I live in a community that we pay home association fees. We very well could go through our HOAs to see if we can set up a voter registration in our community to make sure people register to vote. So I think we got to really look outside the spirit of that and look futuristic. How are we going to get this down the road as we're moving toward voting, as we're moving toward re-election? What can we do as a result of that? I would love for us to have a town hall meeting with the sheriff and the chief of police, for us to sit down and talk about and get their feel of what they're saying, or what their needs or what they're seeing. There again, like I said, I'm a bridge builder. I want to know, how can we build a bridge, and not burn a bridge, but build a bridge. So I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on that. Voter registration is a very important to me.
So Dr. Erica, let me say something now. As I sit and listen to what everybody is saying, I also agree with you that I think that the curfew was very good. And also what we got to realize is, in the meetings we've been, what we found out is that the destruction to the Greensboro area was not really done by those individuals who were trying to protest peacefully. And so it was from people who were outside of the city,
Oh, wow.
identified. I'm not saying that some Greensboro people didn't, but what we were told by sheriff and chief, and understand that these are not Greensboro citizens, one. And so, but I also think that the curfew put some discipline in place for that. And so we got to make sure that we understand that those of us who are leaders and those of us who are not leaders, everybody on here, particularly are leaders. And we understand that in leadership, it's hard to, sometimes you have to make tough decisions. And making tough decisions, and then you don't also have all the answers. And it's easy to always sit in somebody else's seat and have the answers. And we know as leaders that everyone can always tell us what we should do when they're not in our seat. But when they have to sit in our seat, right, and make the decisions hard. I'm saying all that to circle around to all of this. Make sure that regardless of how we feel, that we also give our opinions, but we also come with solutions.
Yes.
And so make sure we don't become part of the problem, but just keep stating problems. That's my frustration for everybody, meaning as a whole. We want to throw blame and we want to say what we should, but we also have to come and give valuable solutions. And that's what I'm saying, because this thing is bigger than police brutality. This is a systematic issue. And Mayor knows how I feel about this. Chief knows how I feel about this. We said it on an interview. It's bigger than police. It's bigger than mayor. This is a system. Chief James didn't create the system. Mayor didn't create the system. This is a part of people who are in leadership right now trying to help build a system that we didn't know was going to happen. So if we all come together and help become a part of the solution, that's the side that I'm on. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care what organization you're over. I don't care what you've done. All I want to know is, can we all come together and say our differences respectfully, and respectfully agree to disagree, and find a way to find solutions like Natasha and you and Lisa have said. That's my heart in it all.
And to go off of that, Pastor, that's why also when I alluded to Mayor Vaughan in terms of the demands or the asks that the Greensboro Rising had pointed out, it is very detailed. It has backstory to it. It has what the request is, and it has action steps, following beneath it that are realistic. I think another thing that we fail to realize when it comes to the curfew, I think initially, no, I don't think I was in favor of it. And I'll say why. Because here we are in this pandemic. People have been closed in. People are dying. People have lost their jobs. And here we are with Ahmaud Arbery's death and Joy. It was just too much, all happening at the same time. Plus, we cannot overlook the fact that there are still deep open wounds from Marcus Smith. He was experiencing homelessness, and he's hogtied, and he's killed in the streets, and there's talk about cover up and wrongdoing. So the fact that people don't feel like that's ever been rectified, Floyd's death was just like a flashback to what has already happened here that didn't garner the same type of attention, but it happened. So I think I didn't feel good about the curfew because people were hurting, and here they are finally getting to be able to be out to kind of express how they're feeling, to try to come together and have some type of quote unquote normalcy, or feeling like they're not alone and they're collective. And then because you do have a few knuckleheads, like you said, from whether it's agitators mixed blended in with the group or outside people, as well as probably some of our own as well, then it's like everybody's got to shut back in now. So it almost feels like people were like, oh, everybody was talking about reopen. Now we're coming out and we have something to say. And it's like, oh no, we're going to get shut back in. So for some, perceive it as you try to shut me up, and not so much focusing on the rioting, or people feel like we want to, and not that I'm saying that anything was wrong. No, I don't agree with rioting. I don't agree with looting and fires and vandalism, none of that. I'm not saying that. But again, like you see graphics, when we are focusing more on the looting than the lives lost, that's a problem in our narrative. And that's why people will continue to be angry. So, that's just my perspective on it. I think, again, we can't keep moving on, pushing things under the rug. We still have to deal with our own wounds here while dealing with other things on a global scale as well that can affect us.
And I think that's a very valid perspective. And I can tell you, the curfew made a lot of people angry. Not just the protesters. I heard it, from people across the board who were unhappy with it, and people across the board who were happy with it. It was one of those where it cut both ways across the city.
I'm sure.
It was something that I did from what I thought was a safety perspective, because I saw, from my perspective, an escalating violence that I was truly afraid that somebody was going to get hurt or killed. And that is why I did the curfew. People may not agree with that, but that is a point of reference that I came from.
But it worked.
That is something that I'll be judged on, whether it was an overreaction or not. I'm willing to live with that. And you're right, it came right on the heels of COVID, and we're still in COVID, and those numbers are continuing to rise, and people are continuing to get sick, and they're continuing to die. And I know that it impacted small businesses, and it was, you know, I made two of the hardest decisions. One was to do the stay-at-home order, and the other one was the curfew. And, you know, those were two very difficult decisions back to back within 2 months of each other. But they were both done for the same reason, and it was for the health and safety of our community.
So as a result of that, and my two are like Natasha and Pastor Clark. I'm about solution. So as we begin to look at and end, kind of move this toward the end of that, the solution to me is that we somehow, and I don't know how this can be done, I'm just going to throw this out there, that we can find ourselves or be assigned to or be given contact information to get in contact with whatever particular group that we can be assigned to help them walk through the process. Because what I have learned, sometimes a person that is not in the spirit of leadership as a mayor, they'll be more apt to talk to someone that I can be the listening ear and come back and say, hey, these are the concerns of this group. And then someone else can go in. So sometimes it's the face that goes into the group that can make a big difference. And being able to articulate what it is, because sometimes, like I said, we got this, they're saying things, but you got to kind of pick out what they're really saying. And so we need to be able to identify who the groups are, and then go into the groups and say, hey, I want to listen to what your concerns are so that we can bring it back to the table and say, this is what this group needs and how can we help that particular organization.
Well, and you know, somebody had mentioned the school system. The other big group that's missing here is the county, because we're also talking about issues that have to do with social services, that we need more social services in our county, and they play a big role in that. And, you know, we need to get them to the table as well. And, you know, that has been a challenge. You know, historically, that's always been a challenge. So, you know, we need to find a way to get them to be a part of this discussion.
That's great. That's great. That's great. So how can that be done, Mayor, Natasha, Pastor Clark? How can we find out who's over these groups that we can get into? How do we identify? Because there's so many. How do we identify?
I mean, go ahead, Pastor.
I don't know the answer to identifying those groups other than by asking. I only met one of them or one of the organizers on Sunday when we had the prayer gathering downtown, and they were at the thing and we had scheduled it, and they didn't know we were coming, you know, but we had reserved it through the city. You know, we didn't know they would be there. However, what we did is we came together, found a solution. Hey, we'll let you in, you know, say your piece at our thing. Let us, you know, give your audience a chance to stay here for prayer, you know. And so it was a solution, you know. But I don't know. I think Natasha may be able to help that.
No, I mean, I think we tap into the people that we might already know who may know, or on social media, you know, who is constantly sharing things. Like, for example, I don't know Crystal Black, but guess what? I've started to read Crystal Black stuff because as I'm scrolling through, other people have shared her stuff. She's very involved, you know, or a Terrence Muhammad or whatever, who might know other people, or going to some of these pages of people that are leading the protest. It might have a group name, but then dissecting or whatever, or even showing up at the protest and saying, okay, so who are the leaders of this? Who are the organizers? Just asking the questions. So I don't think that part will be hard.
Well, and Eric and I just met each other the night before last.
Yes.
Over Facebook. I mean, you know, you just reach out to people, and we know who some of these organizers are, and we'll reach out to them. So it's just a matter of extending the branch, and hopefully we'll find that intersection and
Yeah.
that people will come to the table, because in the end, we all want the same thing.
That's correct. Yes, I agree. I did reach out to, she was not able to be on. She said she's going to try to listen by phone, but I did reach out to her. And so I think she would be another individual that I think we can kind of, she
Yeah.
may know some of these individuals in these other organizations that we can talk to. What I want to hope that we can bring is that I know that the emotional part of it is there, but how do we not incite the anger, but let them know, I know you're angry, but we're here to help bring a peace and solution. What is it that you need to be successful, or what is it that we need to help you? So I think it has to be almost like a pie chart or an organization chart where you cut out the pieces of the pie and see where the biggest piece of the pie is. And then we say, okay, this is the biggest piece of that pie. How do we break it up into smaller chunks to be able to bring this together? I think as well as it relates to the clergy, as it relates to the clergy here in the city of Greensboro, I think to some degree, to my own person, this is my opinion, there is a divide as it relates to the Black clergy as well as our Caucasian clergy. I think there needs to be a coming together for us to have some dialogue and conversation as it relates to the clergy here in the city. I think that is a vital part to how we help, because it has been known throughout history that the clergy at your local church is a great influencer on how or what groups you are part of, who you associate with, what party you belong to. So the church is a vital part of that. And I know we don't like to mix state with religion, so I don't think that would be even it. But I think the churches could play a vital part. I know that we've got some, and I'm going to say this. I know it may ruffle some feathers, but I myself am disappointed at the NAACP here locally. I've not heard anything from them. I'm disappointed in that. I'm disappointed at the Pulpit Forum. But those are what I would say groups that's been around antiquity for such a long time. Those that are there, maybe they need to step aside. And that is a question that I'm not afraid to present that to that group, because I think that needs to be heard. If you want us to be a part of your group, the NAACP, then we need for you to come to the table and let's be heard, because I don't know what they're doing. That has not been made known to us. I don't know what the Pulpit Forum is doing. There again, that's a group that's separate. So how do we forge a group that's separate and apart, but yet can bring some change that's in our city? Pastor Clark, I see you.
Yeah, so let me say this. So I'm a part of Pulpit Forum, and they have spoke out. They are planning and they are meeting. The thing about it is, the strategy is trying to do something efficiently without just doing something, because a lot of people are doing so much that they're doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're trying to tap into, again, finding solutions and speaking out. And I think pastors, like I've seen pastors speak out individually, but the Pulpit Forum has definitely been an advocate for the systematic racism in this city. Trust me when I tell you, they will raise the roof to this city for systematic racism that's happened over the years and even now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do know that they are planning, and I can speak that they are doing that. And so for the other organizations and things like that, and people, like we said, again, I think that we have to come together with our passion,
Mm-hmm.
with our emotions intact, and continue to find solutions. So whereas if the city of Greensboro hosts an event, those individuals, like, we should all be there,
Yes.
right? Or if they have an event, we
Yes.
should go to their event, and we find that common ground to help find like those demands that, Natasha said they sent in. we should talk about that. It doesn't mean that they can all happen, right? I mean, I don't know, like, it's not for me to decide, I'm saying, but same way how we, you know, the city may not be able to meet all the demands they're saying, and you know, vice versa. You know, they may not be able to meet all the demands, like, you know, that the city is asking of them. So I think that those particular people are speaking up and saying something. They're just waiting to do it strategic ways.
Gotcha.
And I think we should also think about people that don't have titles. For example, I'm a mother of a Black son and a Black daughter. So even if I came from that perspective, you know, or someone that has dealt with the loss of a son, for that one of the greatest things I think is the superintendent student advisory council. My daughter got to sit on that. So they're taking problems from their school, and they were meeting with her throughout the year to let her know. They were her eyes and ears. So even if there was like even a student type council for you, the students are in the street. They know what's going on. They're involved. But for people to feel like they have a voice, and I think that's kind of the beauty of peaceful protests, because people, everybody of all ages and ethnicities, if they want to be a part of the cause, can find some way to do so, whether it's donations, whether it's prayer, whether it's marching, making signs, whatever. But a lot of times people just don't know how to get in, because sometimes we have cliques and you're not allowed in. You can't get past that, because I can even tell you, just being transparent. And again, for me, I believe in having conversations, again, that people are afraid to have. I know it may come with hits. I'm not trying to be divisive. I want to be a bridge. I really do. But I feel like we have to talk about it or it's not going to be done. Like, for example, I love prayer. I was glad that we had the prayer gathering. I was disappointed that I did not see female clergy up there too. And that's the thing too. When we talk about clergy, that doesn't mean white and Black men or other denominations of men. That is women as well. And think that's the problem too. We got to stop some of this foolishness, because there are people in house that have vital information. And that's another thing too. I think a lot of people feel like we have stuff right here in our own community to make it work, and potentially, if we could get it together, be a model for outside cities to come in and look at. But I think people get offended and defensive when they feel like people are just grabbing at adoptions of things that other people are doing just to say that they're doing something, or bringing outside forces in if you really haven't exhausted all of the inside resources.
Yeah, I think Bishop Adrian Starks is on now, sir.
I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, I apologize. I've had major technical issues. I've been on, but for whatever reason, it's not permitted me to, I didn't see a mic or camera for me to unmute and to activate a camera. So I believe you see a logo.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to be distant. I just am having some technical issues that I can't explain. I appreciate the convening of this gathering, and I agree with a lot that I've heard. Mayor Vaughan, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And, you know, I sent you that message asking to take the bar higher in the realm of our elected officials, and to hold raise the bar for our police department. That's literally what President Obama was challenging every mayor in every city, and that falls at your feet. I do believe that we can expect more. We can demand more of our police at large. I'm the first to agree that I don't believe every policeman, police person is bad. But when we don't call out wrong, that's when we undermine our good actions and our good record. I've had this problem, and I've said it publicly about many of my colleagues of the white evangelical persuasion. They too have sat silently, and the silence is murderous. The silence is very, very cancerous. And I hope that even with the most recent press release from Chief James in terms of what alterations he's seeking to implement. We appreciate that. But I think that it is safe to say that our nation is restless with minimal adjustments. We're restless, and there has to be systemic change. Do you believe that we have acquired systemic change with these this most recent announcement? That's my question to the mayor.
I do, and especially with the conversation we had today, where the chief said that he was going to put all of the officers through the racial equity training. He also said that, you know, every 5 years they were also going to go through additional mental health screenings, and that he was also offering mental health help for officers after they, you know, underwent a traumatic event as they needed. I mean, he has shown a real commitment to transforming the police force. He, you know, he was just sworn in on January 31st.
Right.
And he went out into the community right away. Actually, he was asked by community organizers before he was sworn in to come out and answer questions and to meet with the community at Peeler Center. I think 200 people showed up. I mean, he has shown that he is accessible and that he was going to hold the men and women of the police force to a higher standard. So I think he has shown that he is committed to the city of Greensboro.
Okay. And I know Chief James personally. He and I have dialogued personally. I empathize with the newness to the position that, you know, he currently is in, and I understand that it takes time to affect sometimes the kinds of change that you would like to see. But what I understand also is that when the house is on fire, you don't just go to the kitchen sink and try to get a cup of water to address the issue. The house is on fire. I don't think anybody on the call will deny that. And so, given that, the response has to be comparable. Mayor Vaughan, I want to ask a question with respect to Marcus Smith's case. Was during the time of Marcus Smith's case, wasn't hog tying outlawed?
No.
Is it currently outlawed?
Yes.
What is the approximate time and the reason for the outlawing of hog tying? Was it the Marcus Smith case?
After the Marcus Smith case, they decided to look at other methods of restraint. They had been using that method of restraint for many, many years. That was not, you know, it's tragic what happened to Marcus Smith. And they decided to look at other methods of restraint after that.
I was told that the restraint is a part of the academy's training in terms of officers being prepared on best practices and not to do that because it can create positional asphyxia. And it is a known fact nationally. I don't understand why it's taken Greensboro, the death of a man, to be in alignment with national knowledge and protocol. And so this is what I believe the community, the Black community, needs to know. The Black community needs to be addressed about this. And I don't think that we feel adequate redress has come along for this. And just in general, when you look at the video, the gentleman is clearly distressed mentally, emotionally. And my heart breaks for that. Because what he needed more to be hogtied, he needed compassion. And the initial engagement by the officer, as I looked at the body camera, he was trying to be there, to be compassionate. And I agree, I confess that. But when I look at the whole picture, that was abandoned. And I think there's so many other options that they could have chosen. But I'm going to go the extreme route, and I'll pause and give you a chance to respond. But here's what I know the policing nationally needs to appreciate in terms of optics. Dylan Roof is the gentleman that walked into Mother Emanuel and killed 9 individuals. James Egan Thomas is the individual that went into the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado with body armor and shot 77 people and killed 12. And I have pictures of proof that both of these individuals, though one has been declared mentally insane, they both were walked away from the scene of the crime, having been murdered, multiple murders, and they were graciously and compassionately walked away from the scene by law enforcement. Versus Eric Garner and George Floyd.
So, you know, what I will say is that, you know, we recognize that the police department responds to an awful lot of mental health and addiction calls. Probably 20 to 25% of the calls that we respond to are mental health or addiction. And people call the police department when they have, actually, this is a conversation that Erica and I started with. When they've got nobody else to call, they end up calling the police department. So we recently started a program when we were looking at what is it that the city of Greensboro can do better. Because the police, they're not mental health workers. So we started dual dispatching when 911 recognizes that there could be a mental health issue going on or an addiction issue. They can only dispatch the ambulance, the fire, or police, but they will dual dispatch. They will dispatch police and they will dispatch mental health workers. So the police get there, they secure the scene, then they bring the mental health workers in. The police then leave the scene and they leave them with mental health workers. And so we are now able to provide the caller with some mental health assistance, which is something that just started in March of this year. So it is a new best practice that we are starting, and it's a pilot program. And we hope that it will give people help that we haven't been able to give before. So, you know, we recognize that people call 911, they're not calling for police, they're calling for help.
And I can say this, Mayor Vaughan, I'm in the mental health field, and there's 1 or 2 things that I have seen, and even started last year. They were called, I want to say, the CST officers who were trained to come in when we have a mental health issue. We'll tell them the diagnosis and what's coming up. So they would dispatch officers that were familiar with this population that I work with. And so one of the things that we have since COVID came in, the Department of Health and Human Services made it clear to us to try to keep them out of the hospitals and from going to jail. So they put extra precautions in place for us to help with that. And I can say from our agency, it has been successful. Now, have we had behaviors? Has the police been called out? Yes, they have. But we've been able to diffuse it and to keep the person from having to go to the hospital, because COVID is real. And if they go to the hospital, they could very well get that and bring it back to us. And so I can say from that standpoint, and then there's something called the yellow dot program, where you put a
Yes.
yellow dot in the back of your vehicle. So when the officer comes, they know that that person has a mental health issue, so they know how to respond to that individual. So there are some things in place, but I think that we need to be re-educated on. I think the public needs to know what those programs are. I think we need to really work with the Department of Health and Human Services as it relates to mental health, because as she said, a lot of this stuff that we see, there are mental health issues that have gone undiagnosed, lack of medication, lack of outpatient therapy, lack of resources when they cut Medicaid. We go to Medicaid reform. There's some things. And so there are some gaps there that need to be filled. And so I think that too, as being in the mental health, we saw that there's some things in place, but we need more re-education on. And so I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Clark to kind of wrap us up, because we didn't want to go beyond an hour time, so we can kind of come bring this thing on in and then go from there. Pastor Clark, I'm gonna lend it over to you now.
Okay, thanks. So I like to everything that like Bishop Stark said, and Natasha and Mayor, everything. I would also like to say, Mayor, thank you for taking your time to
Yes.
be transparent and answer, because you didn't have to do this, and thank you for doing that. But Dr. Erica, I will agree with what everybody has said. Until America, not just Greensboro, we have to start with Greensboro. But as I said, until we understand that we have a system issue, systematic racial issue, not just with police brutality, but even in the courtroom when it comes to cases, even with our judges who are unfair, even in our school systems, even when African Americans go to the banks and apply for loans, even when they're applying for a job or a position, even when they're trying to get a contract with the city that they're in for a big bid. All these things are systematic issues. And until we can all come together, meaning the people, not us as African Americans, because we've been known this and recognized this, I think that it was God's plan for COVID to hit so the world could stop and be still to actually recognize it. Because if the world was not still, we could have had some of the same results. So I'm grateful that God allowed the world to stand still to see what was going on. And so I think that, that's why I'm grateful for the Chief James and the Mayor Vaughan and those people who are understanding that it is a systematic issue, and we need to attack the system to make the system trickle down to handle the things like Bishop Stark said, because he's correct. When you have the Caucasian gentleman getting walked to the car after killing multiple people, and then the African American getting killed day after day, time after time, bail getting set higher, and just all these things. That's a system issue. So we all need to keep pressing the system to fix the system. We want answers. We want respect. We want what's coming. And I think that we are beginning to move into a good place with the leadership that we have to start focusing on the system. And I will say, we as the church, and wrapping it up, we as the church, we have a large voice. We have a large voice. We can tell our parishioners the truth, but also speak truth to power and help them understand and what needs. So we should encourage our churches to go protest, like Natasha said. We should encourage our churches to be at the meetings that the mayor have, and we should encourage them to do whatever we do. But at the same time, because our voice is so large, we also need to make sure that this is not just a one-time thing. This has to keep going. Because we do it and then we fall off. And so I believe that we can all do it. I believe that if we all come together, I think if we all search our hearts, because it's a matter of the heart. I think if we all do that and focus on the system, then we can all get solutions moving forward.
Pastor Clark, Dr. Hendricks,
Go ahead.
and this may be the end. I just didn't know if you guys had seen that individuals had participated in the chat. People had put things in. I didn't want it to just be, I didn't know if no one saw it or.
I didn't see it. Let me see. I wasn't even, okay, let's see what's over here. I think one of the comments, my concern is we are talking about change with the city leaders that have never barely worked, wanted, or expressed change before the tragedy that has caused the world to respond. I believe the solution is to change the faces of the current leaders or hold our current leaders accountable to deadlines. Okay, so that's one, which is kind of similar to what we were saying, and that there has to be a plan of action, and there has to be deadlines. There has to be things we put in place, and as Pastor Clark said, not let them linger. We have to put a action plan into place. Mental health was an issue that needs to be addressed. So yeah, those are the few. If I miss anybody, please don't charge it to my heart. I'm trying to see, the only guidance in the department is directives in reference to the technique, which is also known as Rippy Hobby, stipulate that the person in the restraint should be seated in an upright position. And so as Pastor Clark said, it's about changing systems and how do we change systems. And so my takeaway from this, for those that are here, we need to put together an action plan. We need to put together some things on paper that we can present and say, these are the things that we can do now. What can the church help with now? These are things that we can put on a timeline and to see them work gradually throughout the time. I too agree with Pastor Clark. I think the Lord put the church on hold for us to see what is going on. I believe the church was on hold to even see what happened to George Floyd. I think if we were still busy with what we're doing, we may have looked at it, but not given it as much credence as we have now. But I believe it has shed light on where there's been systemic racism, not only here, but across the nation. And that is a system that we have to work within, and how can we change it? And that it starts with having conversation. But I too, like Pastor Clark, I don't want to just continue to talk, but we need to put a plan into place. So Mayor Vaughan, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your listening ear. I thank you for coming on and being a part of this. My prayer is that we will continue to have more conversations in this nature, and to build bridges. I feel that those that are here, we want to build bridges, and we want to do it in a way that works not against the system, but with the system. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your time. And so there'll be follow-up, and there will be more dialogue. For those of you that didn't speak, if you could inbox me your email. As we're doing things, I can email you stuff. So send me your email, and that way we can stay connected, and I can get information out to you. I thank you, Pastor Clark, Natasha, Bishop Stark. I thank you for your input and your time. Well needed, a much needed conversation. And I thank you for what is, and I feel like there's a brighter future ahead of us in the months and days to come. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.